mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life. We won't live in the past. We're making it alive.
It's time for another conversation. Welcome to Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. And this time around, I'm having a conversation with Marty Strong. He's a retired Navy SEAL, an author, and a CEO. Before we unpack the topic this time around, tell us a little bit about your latest book. Before we started recording, he let me know that it's not just a book, but several books. But just tell us about the latest one, Marty.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Noreen. The latest book is called Be Different: How Navy SEALs and Entrepreneurs Bend, Break, or Ignore the Rules to Get Results. And it came out in December of last year, so it's fairly new. The inspiration is I'm on a board that's a nonprofit called Best
Mm.
Robotics. It does competitions for kids all over the United States
Okay.
using technology and things. So I started learning about creativity and brain science and how to be innovative, and I just wrote a book about it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we're gonna be unpacking what challenges do you see in developing new leaders today? What are
Okay.
the challenges?
I think one of the biggest ones is an aspiring leader or a
Hmm.
follower that is just observing leaders,
Hmm.
sees a lack of accountability, one,
Okay.
which they usually suffer from. If their leaders aren't accountable, they can keep making mistakes and not really, there's no consequences. So they just stay in place and keep making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that most organizations, and I mean any organization, it could be a church, it could be the US government, it could be, any government, any business, has really decided that it's not worth the time and the money to train their people to become leaders,
Hmm.
which is the opposite of the military experience. The military experience is you train everybody to be a leader because if the officer gets killed in war, the next
Mm-hmm.
person has to take over
Somebody
the
has to
job,
step
right?
up. Mm-hmm.
All the way down to the lowest possible person. So you teach leadership skills to everybody. And it's not a waste because as they advance in rank, they eventually start kind of sliding into leadership jobs. So it's not the way it is out in the regular world. It's people have to go out and try to read books and
Mm-hmm.
find mentors to learn how to lead. I think that's the biggest challenge. Observed lack of accountability or consequences for failure
Mm-hmm.
in the leaders that they watch. And the other one is nobody's putting any time to train people to be leaders.
Okay. Before you talk about a little bit, the whole idea of lack of accountability, though, is it that you've observed that in certain sectors, or that's just literally right across the board?
It's a cultural thing. It's
Okay.
I think at least in the United States and in the U.S. Navy. So the U.S. Navy has a rule: whatever happens to the ship, it's the captain's fault. So
Okay.
if the so if the captain's in the harbor and one of his younger officers are taking the boat around, whatever, and they run into something, the
Mm-hmm.
captain gets fired
Wow.
because he ultimately he trained whoever ran the boat into the rocks or whatever. And if he's
Mm-hmm.
on board and he's asleep, same rule. So the Navy rules are you're responsible at all times, you're accountable at all times, and if something happens, you get fired. Then they do an investigation, and then they replace you with somebody else. Now that's maximum accountability, and
Okay.
that goes way back to the British Navy and trying to maintain discipline in ships that didn't come home for a year or 2 years. So
Okay.
you know, um, but in other organizations, the culturally it's become I want to say as far as repugnant, but it's become very, very uncomfortable for people. And in some cases, depending on where you are, what country you're in, a
Mm-hmm.
little bit legalistic to hold somebody that's in leadership accountable and, and get away with it because they can get a lawyer, they can find some human resources rule that wasn't fine. So it gets very, very technical where, let's
Mm-hmm.
say 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
if you couldn't do the job, you'd get a pat on the back, say, hey, sorry, man, but not here. And then you'd go find another job. But
Yeah.
no, people wouldn't have any issues with asking a leader to leave if they weren't doing a good job.
Hmm.
not so much anymore.
Yeah, it's I'm pausing because I'm just thinking if it is, well, to some extent, because an educator, to some extent, sometimes they will tell you that if all your students fail, then it's the teacher's fault. So I guess it's somewhat similar, but I don't subscribe to that depending on the area. So I guess it's debatable.
Yeah. Teaching's a much more complex construct
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
in the military or the Navy specifically, your job is to train every single person on that ship perfectly, and they all
Right.
have to follow your rules, your orders, and all that. In teaching, learning students, what, 10, 15 different influences on the student outside of the construct of the classroom. So uh,
Mm-hmm.
you could come up with probably more than that are affecting their ability to learn, their willingness to learn, their
True.
attentiveness, etc. Hi, this is Marty Strong. I'm your guest on Making It Last. And after a break, we're going to hear a little bit from our partners. And we'll be right with you.
You can't live your best life without a healthy immune system. Boost your immune system the delicious way with Zappy's organic juices and punches. Made from local produce with zero added sugar, our juices cleanse and revitalize your body as they boost your natural immunity. Try our delicious flavors. Beat It, Berry Bomb, Get Fresh, Ton Up, and Island Splash. Find us on Instagram at Zappy's Organics or call or send a WhatsApp message at 1-876-779-8910 to order today. That's 1-876-779-8910. Zappy's Organic Juices and Punches. Live your best life today.
Hello, my name is Nicky Mason, and I want to share with you my journey with Noreen Daly in my communication coaching sessions. As I went through the sessions with Noreen, I was able to recognize my strengths in communication. Some things I didn't recognize that I would do, she was able to unearth and allow me to recognize that these are some strengths that I had. I did have some weaknesses which I was challenged to overcome through research, reviewing other public speakers, and being able to sit before a camera and to speak to an audience, an invisible audience. It was fun, and as a coach, she was patient and she gave good feedback, and she was able to give me the insight into communication as to how to best use my skills, my natural communication strengths to be engaging as a speaker. And I would recommend anybody who seeks to become a more competent communicator to enroll in her program, reach out to her, and I believe you're going to enjoy the journey as much as I did. Thanks.
Langdo Language Institute was created to meet your language and communication needs. All of our packages were created just for you. We are passionate about language and dedicated to your success. We offer the CSEC English program, the Study Body program, the Get Ahead with English program, and the Business Communication program. Contact us at 767-285-0938 or email us at landolanguage@gmail.com, because the real question is, how can we help you?
Welcome back.
True, true, true. What are the challenges?
Um,
You said lack of accountability, and I forgot to
yeah,
write.
lack
I
of
forgot to write the
accountability
other one.
and not a commitment to training people to become
Right.
leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the third one is the definition itself. And in my
Okay.
first business book, Be Nimble, I wrote about it because it's it's not a debate until you start talking to somebody about it, then they want to debate the topic, which is everybody is taught how to be a manager in school, in business schools, et cetera, they teach you to be a manager.
Mm-hmm.
They don't teach you to be a leader. And
Mm.
eventually, over the last couple of decades, they kind of fused where everybody said, well, whoever's in charge of the division, the department is a leader. And
Not the same
I've been
thing.
around managers and I've been around leaders, and you can be
Mm-hmm.
both. You can be both,
Mm-hmm.
but managing is basically, my definition is taking care of things the way they're designed to be operating. So systems, processes, and people based on their resume skills.
Right.
So if everything's going great, you're managing it. If there's a tweak, a problem, whatever, you pull out the instruction guide for whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is, the process,
Mm-hmm.
and you look and you troubleshoot it, and then you fix it, and then you keep rolling along. Managing is an ongoing verb. It's a sustainment
Mm-hmm.
kind of action. So let's say you lose your number one supplier, or you lose your number one salesperson, or even worse, you lose your number one salesperson to the competition. So that's
Right.
a double hit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't manage your way out of that. That's a leadership crisis. That's a leadership point of decision. You have to figure out how you're going to deal with that. It's not in a book someplace, and that's the little psychological crisis. If you're not prepared for it or trained to do that specifically, you find managers kind of standing there looking at each other, and then sometimes they get into a big huddle and say, "We'll just kind of vote on what we
Mm-hmm.
think is going to work," and then you go back to the accountability thing, because if everybody's accountable, nobody's accountable. So
Yeah.
so what you do is you as part of the training, I would assume would make sense, but also just when you have leaders, and I've had lots of leaders work for me. I have lots of leaders working for me now. I just say
Mm-hmm.
this is my definition. Stepping up in a crisis, stepping up and calling everybody into a room, pointing at the whiteboard and saying, "Yeah, so this just happened, and we don't have a plan in place for it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just solve it. Let's just figure it out." That's leading.
Yeah. 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 Any other challenges?
I'd say those are the three biggest, because I consult and I do public speaking, and those three kind of always come up as it's like the triad.
Okay.
If you have the training but they're not training them to be leaders, then you have a problem. If you have the training and you're training to be leaders but there's no accountability, you have a problem. If you have accountability but
Okay.
no training, you see, they all kind of
They'll
you have to have all
intersect.
three legs of the
Okay.
stool.
Do you then just learn how to live with them, or can you actually overcome them?
If you're in the Navy, you get rid of them.
Okay,
Sorry,
well, all
I'll keep
right.
going back there.
Uh-huh.
That's part of my DNA now. I feel extremely accountable and responsible all the time because I can't get
Okay.
that out of the back of my head after
Okay.
20 years of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I think you should never give up. You should always have an aspiration to try to cover those three aspects that I just mentioned.
Okay.
And I've taken over businesses and I've started businesses and I've consulted people who have businesses. And you really can't kind of shoot at what you think the problem is. It's kind of like Six Sigma and engineering diagnosis. You don't go to where the problem is said to be or the smoke is. You start running the whole system down because that could be a downstream effect of the real problem, the root cause. And it's the
Okay.
same thing in looking at leadership. So I know it's difficult, is what I'm getting to, is it's very difficult to step into an organization. I've run organizations. It takes a lot of time to create a culture. People have to become comfortable. So, because you have to be able to fail a little bit if you're a leader. And that's a good thing. You learn and you grow from that, but it's not a good thing if your boss is going to fire you because you failed.
Yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
to have kind of a nurturing, mentoring point of view as the top leadership or top leadership team, or this stuff will never be nurtured and it'll never happen.
Look, you said though, if somebody's still cynical, skeptical, and saying it's easy for him to say based on his experience, he knows how to deal with all of this, what would be the one idea you'd say if you get nothing else from all that I've said? Here's the one idea I want you to get from this conversation. What's that idea? Or a bit of advice?
If you want self-improvement and you're not going to rely on somebody else's benevolence, whether it's a boss or anything else, I would say read every biography you possibly can
Mm.
of almost anybody in any walk of life from any time in history. A well-written biography usually covers the trail, the trials and tribulations, the tears, the victories, and you see people are people. People make mistakes, people recover from mistakes, And if you want to be a leader, then just read a lot of biographies about leaders, because it makes it human and it makes it achievable, because there isn't a leader that's ever, walked this planet that had a perfect track record from day one. And if you do that, you'll also learn how to be a leader, because you'll see like a case study over and over and over, different people, different 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, last week, business, military, government, it doesn't matter. Parents, it's all there. It's teachable because it's learnable. And if you go out there and seek it on your own, you don't have to wait for somebody else to basically try to lift you up.
Love it. Love it. Excellent note to end on. Thanks for sharing, Marty.
Thanks for having me, Noreen.
This was Make It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life. We won't live in the past. We're making